Hello, everybody. Welcome. Over the past few days now, I've been reflecting on features of the dandelion toy and talking about those. And I might refer to that in today's talk, but I want to talk about this concept that I think comes from Hölderlin, the philosopher and poet Pollock. Which is black and white thinking. It's yes and no with no middle, right? And this has to do with how we count things. And you'll notice in the life of your mind that counting is pretty much everything. What you like, what you don't like, what you want, what you don't want, what you think is bad fortune, what you think is good fortune. All of this has to do with various largely delusional forms of measurement and evaluation. And more and more in modernity, common poorly educated humans, which in America is nearly everybody, it's a half joke, they have, they think in bald polarities, right? It's true or it's not. There's no evidence, doesn't exist. This kind of thing. And this is a bunch of nonsense. It's extremely dangerous. It's really the absence of the possibility of thought. This Pollock. And the problem arises from a misappropriation, right? A mistake of transferring features of certain useful and important layers of cognitive behavior or activity to all things. So there's a register of our experience where black and white thinking is useful and real and determines whether something's true or not. Is the water boiling? No bubbles, not boiling. However, if you should notice, this is the important exception here, that if you boil the water, right, the water's boiling, and then you turn off the heat, the bubbling stops, so it's not technically boiling. Hey!
How you doing?
Hey, good to see you, man.
All right, you too.
Right on. The water's not technically boiling, but you don't want to stick your finger in there, and if you put food in that, it'll cook right now. So it's still just as hot. It might even be hotter in some cases than if it were simply boiling. Is the man playing the drums? Yes. Is he not playing the drums? Well, there's at least 9,000 ways in which he's not playing the drums, even though he's playing the drums. So which thing is true, right? But again, there's a useful register for black and white thinking. Did I lose my wallet? Have I lost my mind? Presuming that I ever had one, or that it was a possession that could be lost. I see here on the ground a cigarette butt. Is there a cigarette butt there? Yes. In the simple register, yes. In the complex register, no. Or maybe, or yes and no, right? And this Pollock is a neologism Hölderlin invented. At least I haven't researched this deeply, but I caught this from me, Amy Gilchrist, this morning. So, this counting thing, it turns out to be the source of pretty much every problem that our species faces. Now, I suppose there are an array of problems that are inherent to physical existence in nature if you call them problems, but they're not necessarily problems. However, the problem, pretty much for all humans, is that the humans are counting the wrong things. And they place explicit value on the metrics they have invented to destroy everything. Think about money. Is it important? Well, if you don't have any, and you don't know anyone who is going to, give you their money or give you a place to live or feed you, or you can live without money if you have some land that you can live on and grow food on and hunt on and so forth. But yeah, if you don't have money, and the degree to which you don't have money, right? There are various levels of poverty. From money doesn't matter to me, I'm able to live without money, to money is the most important thing, and I'm dying and my family's dying because we don't have any. So money is a way of placing explicit value on something that doesn't exist. In fact, it's an abstraction of value itself. And you can think of it as death, distributed over time. It's vampiric. It sucks the life out of ecologies and human beings and all of the living beings. And, stacks up numbers in banks and machines and things. So that's a really good example. But we also have these euphemisms, right? Like, A, that doesn't matter. B, that's not true. Right? C, it doesn't count. You'll see children playing a game, and the game will run through some iteration, could be baseball game or board game, card game, and one of the children perhaps made a mistake, or somebody made a mistake before them, and so they realize that the verity of the iteration phase is not true, right? The verity collapsed because of an error in counting or play, and they'll say that doesn't count, right? Also, the phrase "that's not fair." Yeah, this is a very profound implementation of counting. What does fairness mean? How do we determine something's not fair? A kind of counting is involved, even if it isn't explicit. But all the terrors and errors of human history arise when specific humans or groups decide that something counts more than everything. And they are very determined to count it in this particular way, which means they have to, do something terrible to themselves or others, or both. I mean, there's really no way to do. There's this illusion, right, in our legal systems that inculcate us with a courtroom-like mindset in childhood. I can't speak for you, your mileage may vary, but I spend a lot of time thinking about, court cases, and if I was wronged, or if someone was doing something terrible, like making bombs, or Roundup, glyphosate, whatever the fucking absolutely horrific idiocy of corporations is up to, and the war machine and so on, prisons and all this, then I imagined various court cases, right? And I began to think, I would transform my mind into essentially a kind of a virtualized courtroom. Yeah? And, think about arguments and prosecution, defense, all these things. So we are inculcated with this a courtroom mind in childhood, most of us, many of us. And when we decide that something isn't fair, that we've been wronged or violated or whatever, and there are actual violations, it's not all fictional. Unfortunately, the term rape is not equivalent only to being physically, sexually violated. The term covers a broad range of the violations of humans. Violations of the spirit of life, virtue, origin, person, family. But this idea that a criminal, quote unquote, which is a way of counting, right? You decide that one way of counting here is the most important way, and then you say that person's a criminal, which violates the nature of humans, because humans aren't one thing at all times. There's no way to be that. And the fact that somebody violated a law or harmed someone or some place or something, at some point in time, if you freeze that and then project it over the entire temporality of their lifetime, that is rape. That is a violation of the spirit of verity and truth, virtue. Also, crimes don't create debts, right? You can't pay for a crime. There's no way to, the idea that, you can see here, everything here is about counting, right? And our legal systems suppose that crime and punishment are accounting games. And they spend vast resources to both torture people, the people who have been harmed and the people who may have harmed them, and sometimes the people who are tortured did no harm. It's just a mistake, right? Or it was an accident. But so what happens here is, in the name of the people, right? It's the people versus someone. Yeah. Somebody's going to be tortured and wronged, and incredible suffering will ensue. And the people will become complicit in producing that suffering, and they will fund that suffering instead of funding its resolution. And to be absolutely clear, its resolution has nothing to do with punishment. It has to do with the resurrection of the spirit of humanity and community and origin in people's lives, right? If a crime has been committed, what you want is to forensically evaluate the circumstances that generated the crime and use that forensic information to trace the problem back to its origins, and then put medicine at those origins, right? Otherwise, if you're just punishing people, you're just reproducing the crime. So this is a bad way of counting. War is a bad way of counting. Oh, you punched me in the face. Now I have to punch you back. Or, I have to punch you and 9 generations of your children in the face. I mean, religions that suppose that God counts like this are completely insane. To whatever degree God may exist, God does not count like that. There may be repercussions for invirtuous action, karma, and rebirth, and all of this. That's one perspective on the situation. It's not the only one. And it's not clear to me whether suffering in this incarnation somehow ameliorates karma. I suppose that's the concept behind the catastrophic misevaluation of justice systems. And there are more or less systems of justice in the United States. Ours is horrific. There's a branch of humans where if you don't have shit tons of money, they're unlikely to relate with you. There's a stratification of humans according to wealth, power, property, and so forth. For those humans, if you don't have shit tons of money, which is a very bad thing to have, you don't count, right? You count as maybe a human being in their mind, but you don't count as a human being in their relational circles. Now, inside us, in our psyche, we have highly charged situations. That represent moments of painful transformation in our circumstances. And many of these are traumatic, but the concept of trauma is highly problematical. In the annals of psychoanalytic history, there came a time when they were trying to arrive at a definition. By the way, a definition is a way of counting. It's literally a de-infinitization. You throw away everything that you can't grasp, and the remainder counts, right? Which is a really dumb idea outside of registers in which it's functionally reasonable, and only if and only if, you preserve the understanding that you've thrown everything else away on purpose, and you're basically blindsiding yourself, right? You're pretending to be blind, and you're establishing a metric whereby which you can see. This leads to devastating problems. All of the wars in human history, all of the violence, most of the violence, all of the injustice, it starts right here. It starts with counting the wrong thing explicitly and then behaving as if that were the only important factor or feature in the relational situation. Right? You want an explanation for evil and injustice? Here you go. So, this trauma thing, they eventually realized that they couldn't really tell if the event was traumatic or if the person's responses to the event were the trauma. Because some people suffer, some apparent catastrophic misfortune, and it leaves no obvious imprint. Other people suffer a relatively modest misfortune, so to speak, right? Misfortune is a way of counting. And they orient their entire lives around it. Right? So where is the trauma? Is it in the event? It seems unlikely. Granted that there are painful events that we undergo, and we would like to avoid many of them. However, the development of our minds, spirits, and bodies requires painful events. And perhaps our souls. So this miscounting, right, is the origin of nearly every problem that humans invent for each other. Cars are the most important thing. Got to have cars. Okay, well, everything else has to die. Bombs are the most important thing. Well, everything has to die. Banks and money is the most important thing. Kill everything. Right? You can't just go, apparently, and just kill it all right now, but you can kill it in history and the future. And you can kill up a bunch of it right now, too. Anything you kill now dies historically and in the future. So it's a way of damaging time-space. It also collapses the relational diversity, right? It collapses the possibility space for organisms, humans, minds, hearts, souls, all these things. This miscounting. In our psyche, we have things. They're not really things. I don't know what to call them. They're like, they're constellations of relationships and ways of counting them. The geese, they are signaling to each other an eternity. I'm at the water's edge and it's affecting me very deeply. I can feel the spirit of the water. Thinking is extremely deceptive. In order to do any, you have to have a variety of metrics, right, that determine how and for what purposes you're collapsing the manifold, for example, of possible thoughts and purposes of thought. The purposes precede the collapse, and we forget about the purposes, we don't count them. This is another miscounting. And then we believe in the verity of the thoughts because, well, the purposes generated the metric that we're using to miscount. And so we end up with something that fits together structurally. Are you trying to find a place, ma'am?
Yes, where I am now.
I can show you.
Is this lake or?
No, you are here. You are
okay.
Where this E is where you are.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. See, this is a form of counting, right? Where am I? You have to count. Actually, what you're doing is you're evaluating you're evaluating a template, a representation of space, but what counts is where you are and where you wish to go. That's what's being counted. There's a tertalic quorum here. One of my very favorite things in the world. There's an old turtle. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little too much danger for the elder one, right? It's an elder turtle. Ah, there's another elder turtle. And a young turtle with him or her. Yeah. Yeah, I rarely see the old turtles. It's quite profound. Of course, the turtles themselves are unimaginably ancient. This is another kind of false counting, right? It's true that I am, X years old. But when I dream, I never dream of myself as my age. And in my interior, I feel just like a young person, right? I feel like I'm, in my 20s or 30s. I certainly don't feel twice that age. So what is the valid counting? I'll tell you a secret about this. You want to count for at least 3 different purposes and in at least 3 different ways. And one of those ways should improve your purposes and how you are counting, right? What the metric is. Yeah. Crucially important. This single valued counting thing, this is the root of all evil. It's not money. Something that generates money. It's not. Right? It's not just evil. It's counting the wrong things in the wrong way. So for the moment, I may come back and add some things as further reflections emerge in my very strange mind. But for the moment, I'm going to pause here, and if necessary, I'll come back with either new reflections or my closing vocalizations. So grateful for this time together, our ability to unlearn the traps that we are so familiar with and see beyond them to a terrain we can emigrate to and inhabit and sustain together with and for each other and the history and future of all beings. Thank you for joining me. Deeply appreciate your attention and enthusiasm. And take a moment, if you will, tickle the algorithm, buy me a coffee, sign up for my Patreon, whatever feels right. May your ways be beautiful and blessed. Peace for now.